Oh, this has been highly uplifting. Let me just say, gentlemen. I knew we were going to get real black pilly today, but for fuck's sakes, this is going good.
It's dark. It's always dark.
It's just sad.
So
I get frustrated. Go ahead. What's next? What's next? Line them up. I'm ready.
why don't we start talking about this book?
Okay.
Let's do that.
Have you read any of this book at all, Larry?
Peril.
No, I've heard excerpts. I have not read it yet. I've gathered from there, which was one of the most disheartening facts, and we can start there and expound, was General Milley.
Yeah.
Yes.
His response and what he did. I think the fact that that was very disheartening. Again, as a person I do a lot of things because my boss tells me, right? Anyone tells me, and you're supposed to execute with violence. And literally, like, we talk constantly about a coup, and I don't know if we've properly compartmentalized that. And so, like, that was the thing that I've heard. I haven't got the book, I haven't read it, but that was the thing I've been chewing on for a long time. And like, what does that look like on the heels of us literally removing thousands of soldiers here in the next 6 to 8 months because they won't get a COVID shot? We have a person that was literally talking to what was supposed to be our worst enemy, and he was like, "I'm trying to prevent the World War III," but like, what does that look like? Like, I don't know. So we can start there.
And that's perfect because that's literally the part that was reported on when this book first started to go into like pre-sale. Was the prologue. As the book came out, and we found out the only thing people were actually getting previews of, or whatever, however they got the source of reporting, it was the prologue to this book, which is pretty hilarious because I turned on the audiobook and I was like, oh, hey, this is the thing that I heard CNN talking about the other day. So funny and then it drastically shifts after the prologue to more talking about like Biden central type stuff and the election and whatnot. But I'm going to let Don kind of lead this off because he just ran through the whole deal in 9 days.
9 days.
So he's got a great big picture view of it. I'm only about a third of the way through the book at this point. Audiobook, I should state.
Yeah. So there are two main things that you're referring to, right? Because in the prologue, they kind of run over two different scenarios. One of them is when General Milley called his counterpart in China after the election, before the inauguration, to talk about, to address concerns that were apparently raising in China that Donald Trump was going to try and what they call it a wag the dog scenario, was going to try and pop something off between China right before he leaves office in a last minute attempt to bolster control of the nation. I struggle to see a scenario in America in which that happens, just because just something militarily happens after you've already lost the election that he would then get to stay on after he's already lost. That's neither here nor there. The main point is that General Milley took it upon himself to create a back channel, to use an existing back channel to speak with his counterpart in China, to not only tell him that we had no plan to attack, but that if there was going to be an attack, that he would give him prior knowledge.
We'll tell you about it.
Yes. And so this is the quote that I actually highlighted here is, and this is from an excerpt of a transcript that exists of the conversation. So that's supposedly all these conversations that are in quotes are from transcripts that exist or from first person accounts or very reputable accounts. I don't know why else they would be in quotes in a book like this, but that's what it says in the beginning. So, and this is General Milley. He says, "Generally, you and I have known each other now for 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise. It's not going to be a bolt out of the blue. At the very least, it's extremely inappropriate." Right.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of conversation. A lot of people threw around the word treason. Right. And at the end of the day, it was kind of stomped out because treason is like a wartime activity. Right.
We don't go to war yet.
But I think this is probably the closest thing to that, because if there's a military action going to be carried out against China, that's already happening. Right. That's the only way that General Milley is going to know that it's happening, is if it's either right about to happen or it's happening, which would mean that we are, in one way or another, beginning a military interaction or a war with China, right? Whether or not we've actually declared war against China, we are engaging in military action against them. I feel like this, at the very least, at that point, would border on treason, right? And I don't know where it sits if we're not actively in a war with those people, but if we're engaged in like military activity,
it's the Vietnam problem.
Exactly.
Military, it's the same thing with the Afghanistan problem. It's military exercises, military movements, military engagements, whatever you want to call it, in a country or towards a country or nation that we are not actually at war with. That's the problem. Because realistically, I don't know if we're ever going to go to war again. But this is as close to a war as we could get at this point without, live fire shootings. But
and that's why I didn't go straight to treason. In my thought, right? Because that's where I started. But then, what it is you literally have a high-ranking commander undermining the president, right? And General McChrystal back in Iraq was fired for doing the same thing to Obama. He's a two-star. And the fact that nothing happened and nothing was said cultivates a weird society where now the institution of the military that took a massive crack as it was supposed to be apolitical. Like, I've lived my whole entire push here, again, 7 years, not the 40. I'm obviously not the officer General Milley is. That being said, I've lived my whole 7-year career trying to be completely apolitical and then execute the mission of those appointed to hire me. You literally take an oath of it. So I was more frustrated, not with the thought like, okay, this is treason, you need to do something, but more with the thought of like, hey, like you are literally subverting the command of the other person, right? So, like, secondly, there was no tangible evidence that it was like, for him to say like Donald Trump was popping off of the mouth and that was the reason to do it, like that's a long road to hoe when he was literally sending out his wardos for the military on Twitter. Like, the man would just talk. So that was my frustration. Like, nothing happened. So like, whenever you don't punish an action, you reinforce that happening. So like,
right.
How can you say that's okay and then punish somebody else?
Well, and it's interesting what you say about politicizing it, because there's another portion in this book when the BLM protests or BLM riots were happening outside of the White House, and there was the fire in the church across the street, right? And the day afterwards, Trump and a bunch of people in the cabinet walked over to the church and so that he could take pictures. Halfway through that, General Milley walks away, and there's pictures of that, and it turned into a whole deal, right? And so in this book, reportedly, he's very, very upset because Donald Trump politicized the military. He decided he was going to use General Milley as a tool for this for his photo op to make it look like the military supported what he was doing. So General Milley, it's not like he isn't aware that he shouldn't be politicized. You know, he's very, very aware of exactly what his job is. That's why he's been there. Like I said, he's been in the military for 40 years, you know? So it's not like he doesn't know that, you know? So it just kind of underscores what you're talking about politicizing this potential action, something that might happen because China thinks that it's going to happen, you know? And there's a point in here. This is General Milley's justification as to why he was doing what he was doing, right? And this is what he called his Schlesinger moment, right? Schlesinger and General Brown feared Nixon might go around the chain of command and independently contact officers or military unit to order a strike, putting the country or the world in jeopardy, right? And so Schlesinger, I believe, was the chief of staff for President Nixon, right? Yeah. And so they took it upon themselves, much like General Milley, so I should say this first. Not only did General Milley, have this conversation with the Chinese general, he then held a meeting with a bunch of he immediately summoned senior officers from the National Military Command Center. This is the war room in the Pentagon used for communicating emergency actions for the National Command Authority, the president or his successor for military action or use of nuclear weapons. So he gathered a bunch of the leaders that are in this military command council for a private meeting in his office. And I'm not going to say ask them to vow or like swore or anything, but definitely he outlined and underlined what the processes are for launching a nuclear strike in the United States, and made very clear that regardless of what the actions or circumstances were, any of these commanders were to ensure that General Milley was involved in these actions so that before anything happened, he could do something, right? He never said, so I can stop it, so I can do anything, so I can whatever. I just want to make sure that I am in contact, or that if you get calls, Milley said, no matter who they're from, there's a process here. There's a procedure. No matter what you're told, you do the procedure. You do the process, and I'm part of that procedure. You've got to make sure that the right people are on the net. If there was any doubt what he was emphasizing, he added, quote, "You just make sure that I'm on this net. Don't forget, just don't forget." And this is quotes from the book, right? I'm reading from the book right now. He said that his statements applied to any order for military action, not just the use of military weapons. He had to be in the loop. By way of summary, he said, "The strict procedures are explicitly designed to avoid inadvertent mistakes or accidents or nefarious, unintentional, illegal, immoral, unethical launching of the world's most dangerous weapons." It was his quote-unquote Schlesinger moment, but he did not call it that to the assembled NMCC officers. So, which that part indicates to me that he said that to Woodward or Costa, right? Or else they would be implying intent into his actions that all they could do is draw, and they couldn't state it that way, or else it would, I don't know, legally pressing or anything, but it's certainly inappropriate. If he didn't say that to them, then it would be very inappropriate for them to write it that way.
Yeah.
Right. So to continue, make sure everyone on duty in each shift gets this review, he said. Quote unquote, "They're in place 24/7 every day, all day long. The watch teams practice the procedure multiple times a day. Any doubt, any irregularity first, call me directly and immediately. Do not act until you do." So don't continue to do your job. You need to stop and tell me first so that I can do what I'm going to do and then continue to do your job.
It kind of seems like what they're portraying.
"Do not act until you do." He pointed to himself. Then he went around the room asking each officer for confirmation. They understood, looking each in the eye. "Got it," Milley said. "Yes, sir." "Got it?" He asked another. "Yes, sir." "Got it?" "Yes, sir." "Got it?" "Yes, sir." Milley considered it an oath. So which is a weird, I don't know. Again, it's one of those things that I don't know if he said that or if they just wrote that there, because I don't know why they would say it, especially like that. Milley considered it an oath.
It sounds like that
sounds like he said that.
Yeah. It's either that or that's what he told them. And that's the other problem with these.
And
these
that's
Woodward
what I mean
books,
is that he said that when he was talking to them, is I considered it an oath. I don't mean at the time I consider this an oath, to the commanders, but that he said this to the authors.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's,
you're asking for a backdoor agreement from military commanders that you are going to be not outside, but an additional step to these processes and a break certainly in between, or at least that's what it sounds like.
Yep.
Yeah, it kind of like, to me, it sounded like obviously there are a lot of processes in place for the launching of a nuclear missile, right? Or a nuclear weapon. And it almost sounds like he's saying that if there's any break in that process whatsoever, you call me, period, full stop. And I have a hard time understanding why he would think that, because if there are processes that are in the military being, let's say you're on part of the duty crew for, you're actually going to be the guy that turns the key and presses the button at whatever point of, the stage that is, right? Whatever stage at the process that is. Like, it almost sounds like he's expecting there to be people on the other end who would just do it regardless of processy if the president called him. If the president calls, let's just, I don't know, pick a place where there's a silo. He calls that room and says, "Hey, I need you to launch the missile. This target, go." It almost sounds like he's just saying, like, if the president calls you, that there are processes in place, and that's not how this works. You call me if somebody does that to you, because that's breaking the current chain of command, which by nature, and that's like when this first story broke, I was like, geez, this sounds like treason, full stop. But then the more I think about it, it sounds as if he's just subverting the chain of command.
Before we ask Larry what he thinks, I have to remind everybody and thank everybody for watching us on YouTube. You know that you love it, Larry. I have to thank everybody for watching us on YouTube, Salt of the Streets. Obviously, thank you. We have our Facebook, fuck Facebook at Salt of the Streets, our Instagram at Salt of the Streets, our Patreon, patreon.com/Salt of the Streets, all the tiers. Go ahead and sign up there, become a patron, help us make more, better content. We have our Discord, discord.com/Salt of the Streets. We have our own personal social media. I am at Salt of the Street on Twitter and at alpaca_Donovan on Instagram. Colin is at Big Bird Offie on both of those things. Jordan's at Leggings and Aprons on Instagram for some cakes. Lexi Kayo on Twitch for some video games. Atlas A&T if you need your taxes done. Larry the Tax Man. We're here. I believe that's
about as solid as I've ever heard
for all this information. I don't know if I said that already, but that's the last one that wraps it up. It is all there. Okay, so Larry, what is your take on what I just said here? This backdoor or backroom agreement with the National Military Command Center, or commanders from the National Military Command Center, senior officers, excuse me.
I mean, it is what. Listen, I don't know what to say. I have a terrible habit of making everything sound like the end of the world. It is what it is. But what was happening, right? We'll lay it up. Yeah. We'll lay it out in the most basic terms. Someone above me had an order. I sat down with people under that person and cultivated a plan for an unofficial route to where we would veto him through unofficial means in case he ever made a decision, right? Or in another word, we illegally, outside the chain of command, took power from that of the person above us. In this case, the person that ran our government. That is a coup.
Yeah.
And it's fine if people don't think that. And it
That
may
would be
not
a military coup.
100%. It doesn't have to be a coup, but we literally took the responsibility. We took power from the president in that moment. And then we took that power from that moment and then gave assurances to someone that was supposed to be our enemy of the assurances that we took power from that person. I don't know how to construct this in my mind to be okay. I told my friends, I'm not trying to go on Fox and yell about this because I'm still in the Army and I don't want to be that person. But again, any practical person with a brain, and I can tell you from being on the inside, saw that and took it to heart. There are soldiers who saw that and understood that, right? There are some people who are just blindly just living their lives. But again, you tell me another way that I can construct that in my head, or you combat my thought that is a form of a coup, and I'll listen. But no one has. Everybody always says, you don't know what you're talking about.
So,
I have,
I was just saying, what makes it a coup? What makes it a military coup is the fact that our military in the United States of America, by its own nature, has to be commanded and run by civilians.
Yes.
And we're one of the only countries in the world that has that. By General Milley doing this, he is subverting civilian control of the military and pulling it to just within the military itself, which is a problem a country like Venezuela has, not the United States of America. We keep control. The commander-in-chief spot is the president of the United States for a reason. It's because he's a civilian and he is not a member of the military. By Milley doing this, he subverted the civilian chain of command that oversees and runs the military and took it upon himself to make himself the point man and the decision maker there, which I think by definition is a military coup.
That was hot.